It's my pleasure to introduce Sergeant Brad Bakeman. Anyway, he graduated from Bowling Green University in 2006 with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in sociology. He came to Orlando in 2007 to join the Orlando Police Department. After several assignments in November of 2019, he was selected to be supervisor of Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, Organized Crime, and Vice Unit. He oversees all human trafficking investigations throughout Orange and Osceola counties. He has been chair of the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force since January of 2020. He is here today with his colleague, victim specialist Jennifer Casadena, and it's a pleasure to welcome Brad. Please join me in welcoming.
Thank you very much. Like you said, my name is Brad Bakeman. I'm with the Orlando Police Department. So many of you may not know what NBI is. It's the stands for the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation. We were a task force started in 1978. The state attorney looked at the crimes that cross jurisdictional lines and said, we need something that's not quite at the Fed level, but can tackle some of these bigger organizations. So they created NBI, and we have 12 agencies on board right now. Underneath, so we have 2 floors. The 3rd floor is going to be the vice and human trafficking. We pretty much solely deal with human trafficking now. It is taking off and getting more and more attention. More and more cases are coming forward. So obviously, we like to put our time and dedication to those cases. The vice side of it, there's a whole argument for commercial sex being legalized, and we don't focus too much on the prostitution anymore. The other floor is narcotics. It's all organized drug trafficking, and we're recently seeing a lot of the drug trafficking is now going over into the human trafficking, which I'll get into a little bit later. And we investigate mid to upper level organizations. We're not going after the street dealers. We are trying to go after the bigger organizations. So the goals of the human trafficking unit. We are victim-centered investigators. So our number one priority is recovering the victims off the street, handing them over to Jennifer and all the service providers that we have throughout Orange County and Osceola County. And I say that it's all over the state of Florida. We have victims down in Tampa, Miami, wherever we can get them the services that they need. But our number one goal is getting them off the street. And second tier to that is the investigation. Because a lot of times these victims are, again, very difficult to deal with. And getting them to give statements to identify the suspects and the traffickers, it's very difficult. So even if we can't get a case to go forward, which I'm a cop, so I always try to push for that as much as we can, because as long as we have the traffickers out there, we're just creating more holes for more victims to fall into. So we need to make sure we're doing the best we can to have the interest of the victims in the forefront. And then events such as this right here, education awareness. Honestly, before I came to the unit, I didn't know a lot about human trafficking. I knew what it was, I knew it was a problem, but I didn't know the extent. So organizations such as yourselves invite us out here. We get to talk. We get to say what human trafficking is, some of the signs you guys can look for, some contacts that you can have to make the phone calls, and hopefully we can spread the awareness that it is in our own backyard. It's not only in third world countries. It's not outside the United States. It's in Florida. It's in Orlando, and depending where you live, it may be in your neighborhood. Human trafficking definition. So a lot of people will come up to you and say, what is human trafficking? I heard this or I saw that. And there's movies, there's Hollywood, there's TV shows, and they kind of get this perception of the white vans kidnapping kids, and movie Taken, where that this organization comes in and kidnaps this girl. I'm not going to sit up here and say it can't happen, but it very rarely happens compared to the majority of our victims. So we're going to try to give you a little bit more accurate depiction of what human trafficking is. So victims of human trafficking are subject to forced fraud or coercion through the purpose of sexual exploitation or forced labor. The majority of our cases are all the sexual exploitation. And it's not just, we like to call it commercial sex now. Prostitution has kind of been taken out of our vocabulary, so we use commercial sex. But that could be escort services, streetwalkers, strippers, anything of the sort, anything that's going to arouse either one of the sexes. It could be the sexual exploitation. Forced labor, Orange County is got it all. We have hotels, we have agriculture, we have the fields, restaurants, now these big events come in, construction companies, restaurants, hotels will all look to get their staff up, and a lot of times they will, unbeknownst, be hiring people that maybe have traffickers over the top of them. So if you look at that, if you take any part in the trafficking of that person, they've now added purchase, they had obtained before, but if you purchase someone, you are now facing a life felony. A lot of people don't realize that. Commercial sex, it's out there. There's a demand, and where there's that demand, there will always be a supply. But people don't realize a lot of these girls are out there, even if they're walking the street. The pimps, the traffickers are sitting in the cars, they're watching them, they're making sure they're doing what they're doing. If you get wrapped up in one of those investigations and you purchase a juvenile, you're facing a min-man life felony. So there's many reasons not to do it, but going to life the rest of your life, going to jail the rest of your life is a pretty big one. Juveniles. Juveniles cannot consent to sex. Therefore, they cannot consent to prostitution. A lot of our cases, the traffickers will always come back and they'll say they wanted to do it. They were here on their own will. We didn't force them to do anything. We never beat them. We never did any of this. Doesn't matter. Can't consent to sex. Cannot be trafficked. So it's something important to think about when we're talking about our juveniles. Smuggling versus trafficking. This is again kind of going back to some of those images we have of our head of the white vans loaded up with people. Smuggling is a crime against the U.S. border. That is something where you have two willing parties, the transporters and I'm going to call them victims, but they may not necessarily be victims, but they're the ones they're asking to be brought into the United States. Oftentimes, smuggling will lead to human trafficking. Once they get here, they'll have a debt put over their head of $30,000, something absolutely astronomical that they'll never be able to pay off. So then the traffickers, the coyotes who are bringing them across the borders will give them to the traffickers. They will then say, okay, you have $30,000, you need to do A, B, and C for me. Once that debt is paid off, then you can go, do what you want. However, they have room and board, they have clothing, they have everything that they charge them for everything, nickel and dime. So that debt never actually gets worked off. And trafficking, like I said, there has to be the force, fraud, or coercion there. So that's not in smuggling. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. In 2016, which is unfortunately kind of one of the new statistics we have, it's brought in over $150 billion worldwide. And there are currently 25 million victims being trafficked right now. So you don't think it's a problem, but you look at some of those numbers up there and it's kind of scary how much money they're actually bringing in. And like I said earlier, second only to drug trafficking, total dollars generated as far as legal enterprises. And what we're seeing is when you sell drugs, you sell your product, you then have to re-up your product. So then you have to purchase it from wherever you're going to purchase it, and you're out that money. These criminals are now seeing that if they have, so the majority of our investigations are sex trafficking. So I use girls a lot. I'd say 90 to 95% of our cases are females. There are cases with males out there. But these traffickers are realizing if they have 5 girls, they can sell them over and over and over. We had a case recently, girls are seeing 40 to 50 people a day. So if you hear those numbers and $100 to $300 per person, depending on the clientele that they're going after, all the way up into the thousands. But it is a money-making business. These traffickers see it and they're witty, they're good at it. Florida ranks 3rd in the nation. So I kind of look at that statement as twofold. Yes, it's very alarming. It is here. It's in our backyards. But events such as this, we're out talking to people all the time. The more awareness it is out there, the more calls are generated for traffic, the more cases that are generated. So you may have a state that has there are politicians, there are top cops, sheriffs. They don't believe human trafficking exists. They won't admit it's in their community. They won't push it. They won't push the awareness. So what all these people have in common, they're all traffickers. So as you can see up there, any sex, any race, any socioeconomic class. We just had a case. His picture is not up there. The guy right in the middle, Rich Rawls, he was 73 or 74 when he got arrested. Did his time and he is back out. We believe doing the same thing. We have an attorney who was arrested 2 years ago. He was in his 70s, successful-ish defense attorney, but they were using their practice as a way to recruit the girls into their business. So traffickers can be individuals, families, or groups. We're seeing a lot in the families. We see families that are groups. We have a family of 3 brothers and a mother. They're all trafficking different victims at different times. These traffickers are good. They're master manipulators, and they understand that any attention is what these victims are looking for. They look for those holes, and they're like, "I will give you what you want. Just come, be friends with me, be a boyfriend, be a girlfriend," and they just build this relationship up. And that kind of goes back to kidnapping. It happens. It doesn't happen a lot. There's a Romeo pimp, is what we call it, and they will meet the potential victim, and they will become boyfriend, girlfriend, give them everything. And they build up this confidence and this relationship. And then once they have them kind of in their grasp, they'll flip the switch and say, "Hey, by the way, you owe me." I think it's similar to the debt. But remember that dress I bought you? Remember those earrings I bought you? Remember I got your hair done? Well, you owe me for all that. And unfortunately, these girls, they have these voids, and they look at these guys and women. We have plenty of traffickers that are women, but they're willing to do whatever they say so they can continue to get their hair done and their clothes. We all know you're going to butt heads with your kids, and the traffickers know that. They know to target that age because they're already looking for a reason to, "Oh, my mom did this or my dad did that. I want a cell phone, or I want a computer," or whatever it may be. And these pimps know that. These traffickers know that, and that's why they target these teenagers. And they look for them crying and walking around downtown or wherever it may be. Like they just swoop right in and give them that shoulder lean on, and it's pretty sad. So how victims are targeted, kind of what I was just talking about, but social media is a huge one right now. Instagram and Facebook, a trafficker can send out 2,000 messages with a click of a button. And he'll say, "Hey, come party with me in Orlando. It's great. The weather's good. Beaches are awesome." He'll probably send some fake pictures of a car or a house or something like that and say, "Come party with me." And you get the one victim that just had that fight or whatever it may have been. It's like, "Yeah, you know what? I do want to go to Florida." But they'll come down here and it's the same thing. They'll Romeo them. They'll say, "This is great. Come to Florida. We'll go on these lavish vacations. We'll have these fancy cars." And then all of a sudden they will flip the switch. But realistically, it's anywhere where you see large groups. There was a trafficker that said he can just sit at a gas station and watch girls going in and out, the way they carry themselves, their demeanor, their confidence. And they know right there that's somebody that I can go for and I will get, or I'm going to wait for the next one. All right, then I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer as she can focus on the victim.
So a little bit about the victims. That the average age of the victims that we encountered with trafficking are ages 12 to 14. And that is something that really surprised me when I first started working in human trafficking, because I did not think that our victims would be so young. But the majority of the victims that I work with are minors around this age range. So who is the most vulnerable? It's juveniles that have prior sexual abuse, juveniles in the foster care system, and runaway and homeless kids. Although this is not always the case, that is the majority of the victims that we work with. Homeless and runaway kids are At most risk, just like Sergeant Bateman mentioned before, there are kids that are in need of just getting their basic needs met: food, clothing, shelter. And out there on the streets, there are some traffickers that know that that is what they need, and that's what makes them, what makes the kids gravitate towards them. And any history of drug abuse or dysfunctional families also makes them a higher risk, because the pimps and traffickers are ready to provide them and with drugs to feed that addiction. Victims will go back to the familiar where they are accepted, even if that's where they're being abused. And this is something really difficult to understand if you're not familiar with human trafficking dynamics, because you're probably wondering, why would they go back to someone who has abused them? But there is something called a trauma bond, and a trauma bond is a result of what traffickers provide, which is intermittent positive reinforcement, which makes it that in their eyes, it's not all bad. Sometimes they are very loving. The trafficker can be very loving and very caring, which is exactly what they need. And then they cycle through this cycle of abuse. So the victim essentially stays just waiting for that next time that the trafficker shows love, shows care, shows, to provide them with all of their needs. The victim often believes that if they love this person enough, they will be able to change them and make it so that this person treats them better. Obviously, we know that that is impossible, because it's not about love. It's about a trafficker having power and control over the victim. And the ultimate goal of the trafficker is to make the victim believe that it is her choice to be there, that she is there of her own free will. So because they don't want to identify as victims, that causes a huge issue for us. Is, like Sergeant Bakeman said, they don't want services. They're saying that they're there on their own free will, that no one is taking their money, no one is forcing them to do anything. They don't trust law enforcement, so the fear of retaliation is a major reason of why they don't want to disclose victimization to us. There's a lot of self-blame, shame, and fear, especially when they don't want to talk about all of the sexual acts that they've had to perform. There's a lot of shame in that. Sometimes they say that they themselves have put them in they put themselves in that situation, so it's their fault. And that's where I, as an advocate, explain to them what the cycle is with human trafficking and how this coercion and all of that works, to help them understand that it's not their fault. The fear of what's next after talking to law enforcement. They have been with the trafficker for a long time. They have been with the trafficker for a long time, so they know this dynamic. It's almost like they have learned how to survive with this trafficker, and in this situation, they are afraid that they won't know how to survive outside of this situation. And we're going to play a video here in just a second.
A girl to fall in love with you and get a girl to be willing to do this.
It just happens. Like, most of these girls, it's not hard. You just gotta answer their call. You get in there, you find the crack. Like, some are drugs, some are just, they need to hear I love you.
But if they just want someone to love them, this guy's not talking about loving her.
Oh, I know, but that's what she believes. It's the illusion. Be there for them. Tell them what they want to hear. You tell them, well, we need to put money away. I'm going to do what I do. See, I'm putting my 50 in. You have to do your 50. So there's another way you can have sex with guys. Don't worry, I'm going to love you. I'm going to go and sell drugs if that's what I'm doing on the side, or I'm going to be making money. I'll be there to take care of you. At the end of the night, you're home with me. Every girl's had that fantasy wedding in that house with a pink fence. You sell it to her. She'll do it.
Why will she do it?
You just sold her a dream. These girls are broken. It fixes them.
What fixes them?
knowing someone out there cares. The illusion of it, right? Me, I don't let that happen. Because I'm not gonna sit and lie to them and say, oh, I love you. I don't. I love my money.
And would you call that being a pimp?
No, I don't know what you call it. Not a pimp, a manager.
So what the man in the video was describing is a perfect example of grooming. He knows exactly how to groom his victims. He knows how to read them and read what they, exactly what they need. He knows that they want love, they want attention, they want someone who cares for them. So that's how the grooming process starts. It's a process aimed to achieve control through physical, emotional, or mental needs. It ultimately results in insults and name calling and nicknames in order to erase their identity. Eventually, once they are past that sort of Romeo stage, that Prince Charming stage, they start to exert their control in telling the victim how to walk, how to talk, how to behave in front of other people. They alienate the victim so that they no longer have a lifeline to the outside. They don't have anyone to go to. This we see a lot with holding of personal items like cell phones and IDs. Obviously, someone not having any form of identification prevents them from running away, prevents them from doing a lot of things that they would need to do in order to get away from their trafficker. And photographing and videotaping sexual encounters for blackmail, the threat that they're going to disperse these images and videos in order to keep them there. So these red flag indicators come from the Department of Health and Human Services. So some of these might be things that people in the healthcare system may see. When you see victims in the healthcare, like in hospital setting, things like that, some of the red flags are an inconsistent story of how their injuries happen. They're unwilling to answer questions about who they're with and where they came from, where they live. They might be with someone who doesn't allow them to answer these questions for themselves. So someone that's wanting to answer that for them. So there's some evidence of controlling and dominating relationships. They also demonstrate being fearful or nervous. They may avoid eye contact. And again, they're either not aware of where they are, what city they're in, or a specific neighborhood, or they're not going to be willing to disclose that.
All right, so if you want to read this real quick, this is a letter to one of our previous victim advocates and an agent. But this kind of reiterates that we struggle. The relationship we have with these victims is worse than any parent and teenager relationship you could ever imagine. Like 1 second they hate us and they will spit on us and they'll do everything they can and say, screw you, I don't want your help. And the next second they realize we do care for them. It's not just the case. So it says, today I know freedom I've never felt. When I was law enforcement as a little girl, I hated y'all a lot, but being sober helped me see, despite my hate for y'all, there was love y'all gave me. I don't know why. Maybe y'all knew what I did. I thought I was past lovable. I thought the rest of my life, if I made it seem the rest of my life, would just be the hell I've always known. And for some reason, y'all saved me. Saved my son from a life without his mother. I've grown so much since. I wish other girls in Orlando had the chance that I have. On the 28th, I'll be going to take my third GED test, and I know I'll pass. All this is because you guys didn't give up on. You guys didn't give up even when I was ugly to you. I have hope. I have peace. I have God. I can be going to bed knowing I'm safe. I haven't felt that way in so long. Thank you guys for all that you did. I hope and pray y'all give what you've given me to another girl. P.S. I will be clean from any sort of substance for 8 months starting on the 27th. Thank you for saving this just little girl. She's been able to grow into beautiful. And she is now, I think she's in her first or second year of nursing school. So she's one of our great success stories. And you see that. And you think of what they have gone through on a nightly, daily basis on the streets. And you see stories like this. So,
Excuse me.
Yes.
We've about reached the time limit.
Just the
Thank
last
you
one.
for your presentation and for what you do. We do have a few minutes for questions. I did want to leave a few minutes for Q&A. So Anybody have any questions? Well, I'm walking over there. You said Florida ranks third in the nation. Where does Orlando rank in the state?
I believe it is third. Miami and Tampa. Yeah.
Thank you for everything that you do. I can't imagine just the heaviness that you go through all the time. I've always wondered, why are there not more severe penalties for people who prey on children? It seems like if there were the death penalty for anyone who sexually abuses a child, that it would stop it pretty quickly, because they wouldn't be repeat offenders if they're dead, and that would be discouraging to other people. So why isn't there this urgency to protect these children?
That's a great question. And coming from a cop, I agree with you 100%. Legislatures and everybody else may not feel that way. Trafficking with juveniles is a min-man life felony. So they cannot plead to anything else. They face life in jail. That's it. So it is a pretty serious, it's not, you're not dying, but you will die in jail, which I personally think might be worse off than just dying right then.
You just keyed up the question. In the middle, you showed I think it was a 70-year-old pimp who had been doing this a long time. You had him dead to rights, arrested him, put him in jail, which you just said, minimum life sentence, and he was out in a year and he's doing it again. How does that happen?
Adult. It's the difference between an adult victim and a juvenile victim. So if it's an adult victim, so unfortunately in the courts, it's very difficult to prove the force and fraud of origin. So a lot of times the prosecutors will look to get pleas. This guy was elderly. They thought, hey, we can give him a smaller sentence, he'll accept the plea, and he won't be doing it again once he gets out. But it is the problem with adults versus the children. That's the biggest difference.
Thank you so much for being here today and giving us this background on what's going on. Please, well, thank our guys. It's my pleasure to introduce Sergeant Brad Bakeman. Anyway, he graduated from Bowling Green University in 2006 with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in sociology. He came to Orlando in 2007 to join the Orlando Police Department. After several assignments in November of 2019, he was selected to be supervisor of Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, Organized Crime and Vice Unit. He oversees all human trafficking investigations throughout Orange and Osceola counties. He has been chair of the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force since January of 2020. He is here today with his colleague, victim specialist Jennifer Casadena, and it's a pleasure to welcome Brad. Please join me in welcoming him.